Hello everyone, Gary here from Timeline Astrology. This is the May forecast, the sidereal transit report. So this is, I think, a very interesting time we're living through. Of course, we're on the knife edge now in terms of what's happening globally in wars. And at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of more beneficial transits coming in May and June. And so May and June are generally, anyway, the more kind of the sweet spot in the year every year. But this year, because of everything else that's going on, in a way, they're more poignant. And I guess really we have to consider the blessings that we're afforded in life as, blessings that we should enjoy. That, if we have anything at all that we can enjoy in our life, that we should give thanks and appreciation for that. Now, the month starts out in a very precarious situation because of the planets, Venus especially moving into Aries, and Uranus and Jupiter breaking up initially, with Jupiter moving into Taurus and then Uranus in Aries until June. And then they'll get back together again, Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus, and then Uranus will retrograde and go back into Aries by December. So this is kind of like on and off again relationship going on between Uranus and Jupiter. And essentially what we're seeing in that case is protest. Jupiter and Uranus oftentimes bring about protests, especially around war when it's in the sign Aries, the sign of war. And with all of that going on, like I said, there is also some sweet spots with then Venus moving into Taurus with Jupiter. And even though they're all combust, they're too close to the sun, and more especially Jupiter, because there's an argument about whether Venus can actually be combust while direct. That's another whole other thing. I'm not going to get into that here. But essentially, because we cannot see Venus and Jupiter, we might sense that there's a lack of hope or there's a lack of peace in the world. I mean, obviously, if there's a lack of peace, then there's a lack of hope, if you consider it that way. But despite all of that, there's still this Taurian vibe going on in May and into June that is more enjoyable. And in a way, as conflicted as it might be with everything that's going on in the world, we do have to enjoy ourselves when we can. And if we can, we should, because, well, again, there are blessings. That is, what we have to give thanks for. So to enjoy what we can and to recognize that it's all too fleeting. So without getting into that too much more, let's get on with the transit. So this is the first big change that's happening in May. On May 1st, Jupiter moves into Taurus, and for the coming year, Jupiter in Taurus is generally more enjoyable, generally, because this time, of course, again, it's joined by Uranus. So that kind of shakes it up. So Jupiter enters Taurus, and that marks a period of, relatively free from conflicts in a way, because this is the first time since 2019 that Jupiter is neither conjunct Saturn, Pluto, or Rahu, or aspected by Saturn, Pluto, or Rahu, or in its debilitation, whatever it might have been since 2019, we have not had Jupiter free from all of those quote unquote malefic influences. So now Jupiter in Taurus is definitely a period, I think, that is more, or I should probably have written here, freer from its recent challenges. It's not completely free, obviously, but it is freer. So when Jupiter is freer, there is more of a sense of buoyancy generally. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't problems in the world. And in fact, when Jupiter is freer to express itself, that means maybe more protests, that people have this hope that things could get better. So then they protest on the streets. So that's the kind of Jupiter vibe as well. Jupiter in Taurus, though, is less about war as such, even though, that is a continual story. It's more about money. It's more about finances and maybe also money around war and money that's spent on wars. That might be a big theme moving forward for the next year. Protesting, the amount of money that's been spent on war and so on. So the other thing is that promises a focus on sustenance, community, and comforts, but again, mixed with a lot of surprises because of Uranus. So the focus will be wanting to have a secure bank balance. The reality of it is Uranus is going to shake it up. Now, it could also bring in, big wild swings up and down. That's another potential here. And also because Jupiter in Taurus is now in a square to Saturn, there could also be some issues here in the economy that we have to be mindful of. Historically, this has often meant recession or at least some challenge, because Jupiter in Taurus is in the opening square, as it's called, after its conjunction with Saturn in Capricorn back in 2020. So 4 years later, we have this opening square, and it sort of like tests our resolve in a way and our big ideas about what we want to do in our life. So that's another whole thing going on, as well as the Uranus conjunction with Jupiter, which then throws a spanner in the works. So we're tested about our big ideas and can we see this through? And then Uranus comes in and offers some unexpected twists and turns, and then force us to really look at, well, can we really see this through? And actually, we have to remind ourselves with Jupiter, it's all about the why. Why are we doing anything? It is more about meaning and purpose than it is about enjoyment. Taurus is more about enjoyment. Jupiter in Taurus isn't a good fit for Jupiter as much as it is in even Aries in a way, and certainly not Pisces or its own other sign, Sagittarius. In Taurus, it's kind of like meaning can kind of slip away, and this kind of indulgent, sort of enjoyable theme can slip in, where after a while it becomes a bit hollow. So we have to be mindful of having meaningful engagement in our enjoyments, that we don't just want to make money for just money's sake, that we want to do something meaningful with it. For an example, so there are obviously potential for innovation here with Uranus and Jupiter in Taurus, innovation in terms of our finances. And so, yes, there might be just some disruptions, but I do think that we could see some major advancements and even maybe new digital currencies and all of these things. That's more so in the years to follow, because Jupiter is in Taurus for a year, Uranus is in Taurus for 7 years to come. So we're going to see a lot of new innovative approaches to the economy and money and energy as well. The other thing about Taurus is about energy supply. It's not just about food. It's not just about our bank balance. It's also about energy, and the energy grid, and all of this is likely to see some disruption with also, again, some innovation. So Venus then is going to move into Taurus. Again, another sweet spot in the year. Until it does, though, we have Venus in Aries, which is precarious, to say the least, for world peace. So we have to be really mindful at the beginning of May and later on as well. And as Venus slips out of Taurus by the end of June, and especially into July when Mars meets with Uranus in Taurus, there's a potential here for major escalation in war and major attacks and natural disasters and all kinds of things happening in the world. But at any rate, this is the sweet spot we have to take full advantage of, because if we're not taking advantage of a Venus and Taurus transit, then there is really very little we can take advantage of. If you cannot enjoy this, then what can you enjoy? So Venus is in Taurus from May 19th until June 12th, and it is its own sign. So it's very much at home. It feels at home. There's some interesting guests in his home with Uranus coming in June. Jupiter is there. And so maybe Venus doesn't feel like it can kick back completely because it's also combust at this point. It's too close to the sun to be visible. But again, there's an argument about whether Venus is actually combust while it's direct, that it can only actually be combust while retrograde. So leaving that aside, Venus is having to, play host to Jupiter, the Sun, and Uranus. And yeah, it's not able to kick back as much as it would normally. So it's not kind of like going out on the perfect summer day, enjoying the meadows and sitting out in a park and just forgetting about all your worries. That's normally what Venus and Taurus is about. But there are other things to think about. There are more bigger issues at hand here. So it does so promise some ease and enjoyment in personal and financial areas. So relationships and finances could improve for many people under a Venus and Taurus transit. Again, however, there are disruptions. We have to anticipate those. And especially as Venus is entering the sign, because it's at that time that Mars conjoins Rahu, the north node of the moon in Pisces. So there's a major disruptive sort of energy going on there as Venus moves into Taurus initially. Overall, it can generally encourage indulgence and focus on life's comforts is there. We just have to be mindful of the volatility. And in a way, and as we see with the new and the full moons in Aries and in Scorpio, we really do have to balance all of those sort of catastrophic thinking with more comfortable enjoyable things in our life. We need the Venus in Taurus to give us comfort, to even give our soul comfort. You know, so the sun is in Taurus as well for the first half of the month. Without Venus, without Taurus, life would be unbearable. We need the Venus. So that's something that we really have to take full advantage of. So these are the major lunations: Aries new moon, Scorpio full moon. So the new moon on May 8th is, it's showing that we're having to really start again and start from scratch here because it's a new moon in Aries. And this is very much about new beginnings, as every new moon is, but this one even more so. It's a new moon in the first sign of the zodiac. So let's start again, especially since recently we had to scrap a lot of ideas with Mercury retrograde, and Mercury continues to move past its shadow phase, and it won't be until right after this new moon on May 14th that it moves beyond its shadow phase, the zone of its retrograde, and so moves into new territory in Aries. So that's a sort of a hint at, this sense of things are going to start really moving forward by mid-May or so. And especially then when you consider, again, like the previous slide shows, Venus moving into Taurus by the 19th of May, and Mars moves beyond Rahu, the North Node, and then eventually in June moves into Aries. Things are absolutely moving forward by the end of May into June, and we're going to feel the impetus to move forward on something and to take action. So Aries new moon is probably better for planning that action than it is actually taking action, but a great time to plan. Then the full moon a couple of weeks later is in Scorpio. So we have this very Mars-like month in a way, with a new moon in Aries and a full moon in Scorpio. A full moon in Scorpio is full on. I mean, every full moon is full on in a way, but this one's more so. It's a very intense full moon in Scorpio on May 23rd. It offers depth and urges us to find a balance between all of those comfortable things in Taurus and the more uncertainty and vulnerability that we feel in Scorpio. And in a way, we always have to find that balance, but this month more than ever. May is a time to find balance between comforts and uncertainty, security and insecurity. And in a way, unless we have our bellies full of good food and we are surrounded by good company and support in our community, in our family, that's Taurus. We're not going to be able to dwell on the sort of catastrophic thinking that Moon is Scorpio can often lead to. We need to be well grounded and supported to be able to go through, like, therapy, for example. Scorpio is very much about going through a therapy or a transformational experience of some kind. You cannot do that unless you are supported in a very basic way. And that's Taurus. And we always have to find a balance between the two. So for this full moon in Scorpio on the 23rd of May, I think that will be even more important. So combustions, and yet more combustions. This is the sort of rub of May and June, is that all of these planets in Taurus are combust. Again, we have to consider whether Venus is or not, and maybe that will be the saving grace in all of this. Jupiter is absolutely combust, and it's combust as Venus moves in on the 19th of May by exact degree. And even though we would call that Kazemi, this in the heart of the sun, in another way, it can seem like it's empowered by the sun, there is still a combustion. When you cannot see planets, it impacts their outer significations. So if we talk about Jupiter as and Venus as, our guides, our guiding planets in a way, they give us advice, they give us wise counsel, and we know what to do because we can see clearly what we need to do and make a really good decision. When we can't see them, we're not really clear about things. And so people are prone to making choices that perhaps they will, reconsider later on. There is also the practicality of combustion leading to just feeling burnt out. And this is more especially for the Jupiterian signs, Sagittarius and Pisces. And you can also consider perhaps Venus, signs Taurus and Libra, and everybody in general. Like when we're feeling kind of burnt out, when we're overdoing it, and especially in Taurus, when we're indulging too much, it just adds to the burnout. So we just need to be mindful of burning out and overdoing anything, overindulging, because if we're feeling vulnerable, especially leading up to that full moon in Scorpio, if you're feeling vulnerable and you overindulge, I mean, obviously, that's going to just add to the problem. It's not going to ease your worries. It's going to eventually actually add to your problem. So again, getting a balance right, not just between Taurus and Scorpio, but within Scorpio or within Taurus, more so thinking about a balance about, some pleasure is good, too much pleasure, not so good. And so we have to consider this. So I guess combustion more than anything represents a purification of the planet in question, that we have to purify our ideas and ideals. We have to purify our, love of life and appreciation for those things. And by actually purifying our life and getting rid of some things that are not good for us, we can enjoy the things that are more so good for us, the relationships that nurture us, the food that nourishes us. These kinds of things are Taurus, and the combustions simply suggest that we have to get rid of a lot of things that are not good for us, essentially. So to add to the complexity, as again, Venus moves into Taurus on that day, May 19th, we have a Mars-Rahu exact conjunction. This is Rahu, the true north node. Now, this is complex for sure, and it's in Pisces after Mars has already conjoined Neptune in Pisces. It leads to a lot of confusion and a lack of clarity as to where to put our energy, more so. Mars Neptune is that, and Mars Rahu is even more that. Mars Rahu is like spikes and major dips in energy. So it's kind of like instead of having one espresso shot, you have 10 and then you're floored. Rahu is like a block for Mars, but it initially exaggerates it so that you are, again, floored. It's like it over stimulates the nervous system, Rahu and Mars. And it's kind of like, you have to question how much you can take and how much you need to just kind of switch off at this point, especially around the 19th of May. So consider that leading up to this mid-month period, just, maybe not overdo things and consider your energy kind of coming in spurts and dying down again and being a bit all over the place and not being very clear where to direct your focus. Because don't worry about it, Mars is going to move into Aries in June, and there's going to be a lot of direct focused energy and willpower and courage and strength to take something on. In May, it's less about taking something on and it's more about kind of just going with the ebb and flow and allowing things to kind of, work themselves out in their own good time. It would be a good month, I would say, May, to kind of just kick back a bit more and, yeah, not necessarily sit on this, because Mars Rahu is definitely not something you want to sit on. It's more about you don't want to be too focused on it and trying to make everything work out in just such a way. It just needs a bit more of an open-minded sort of, let's kind of go with the flow here and allow things to be more and surrender into this a bit more. So that's Mars Rahu. And then finally, there is obviously a sweet spot, the sweetest spot in the month and the whole year in a way, if you consider this Akshaya Tritiya, the undiminished third lunar day. Tritiya is the third lunar day of this month. It happens on May 10th, mostly. It could be on the 9th, late on the 9th as well, depending on where you are. So mostly into the 10th for most people, we have this really auspicious day. Essentially, it's a day of new beginnings. And in India, it's traditionally used to buy gold and make investments and for initiating auspicious events, whatever it might be. It could be moving house, it could be getting married, making a big purchase of some kind, or even just setting an intention. Even if you don't have something to begin, this would be the time to begin the intention of that. And that could be putting pen to paper, or it could be lighting a candle and setting an intention around that thing if you don't actually start something. But if you have something to start, this is the time to do it. Again, whether it's moving house, getting married, or any of these kinds of things, starting a new project, a new business, buying something that you were considering buying for a while. It's an auspicious new start, and it's said to cancel out anything else that may be inauspicious at the time. So you don't have to consider all of the muhurta, all of the different kind of electional astrology things that you have to normally consider. You just consider this day is when the sun and moon are both exalted on the third lunar day. It's our lights, our luminaries are bright and shining bright at this time, and it's giving us a sense of newness, and it's the best time to start something new. So that's on the 10th of May, maybe on it late on the 9th of May, depending on where you are. So before I wrap it up, I do want to mention that I have a couple of presentations coming up. If you're a patron, you'll get this before anyone else. Consider signing up as a patron, or just subscribe to this YouTube channel. and you'll get word of this World War astrology presentation. There's no avoiding this topic anymore. We need to talk about it. I'm going to look at the astrology for the next decade and show how all of this is panning out in the astrology. So that's one. The other one is this dystopia to utopia, and how we have to navigate from one to the other, and how that in astrology represents the journey from Scorpio to Aquarius, from the south node of the moon Ketu to the north node Rahu, from, in modern astrology, Pluto to Uranus, and how we have to really leave behind this notion of that it's one or the other in a way, and we have to come to terms with this conflict within ourselves, essentially, around this kind of dystopian view or a utopian view, as if there were just one or the other. And it's not like that. It's a mix of both, and we have to make peace with that. And I'll go through that in the presentation. So that is it for this presentation. I hope you got something out of that. Consider signing up as a patron. You can go to patreon.com/timeline astrology, or just subscribe to the YouTube channel and you'll get notification of when they do eventually come out for the public. And yeah, I wish you all the best for the month of May, and until next time.